Good afternoon, friends in the room and those joining online. I understand that some 70 of them have joined online. So welcome to everyone to this very interesting book discussion on rising ambition, carving new pathways, India's energy transition, which is the latest by Mr. Ajay Shankar. Mr. Ajay Shankar, as you know, has been a very sort of eminent administrator, civil servant, and a public intellectual who has been constantly guiding the policy process. And we at ISID are very privileged to have him as a mentor and a member of the board. And so we look up to him for inspiration on our work on industrial policy. Sorry for my, throat. This is just very bad. So please bear with me. Now, this book is about his other passion. The one passion that he has is about industrial policy that we experience every now and then. And this is about his other passion, which is about energy transition. And I think I have been sort of going through it in parts, and I am very impressed with the kind of conviction and how forcefully it comes out that India can and will achieve the not only the climate, clean energy goals, but that this drive towards clean energy transition will become a kind of key driver of India's uh, economic growth. So he describes how in 2021 in Glasgow COP, when India raised the stakes so high and assumed some very ambitious targets, such as 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, everybody was taken by surprise that can we really achieve it? And because at that time, there were only 150 something we were sitting at. And then by 2030, raising it to 500 gigawatts, the 50% of energy coming from renewable sources. And so there are a few more such ambitious targets. But now, in this year, having crossed the 50% target in renewable energy, I think we can feel that, this ambition, raising the ambition and trying to work towards achieving it was a good thing, and it is possible to do it. So we achieving at least one of these targets of the 50% energy coming from renewable sources being achieved 5 years ahead of time, I think is a very, very important endorsement of the ability of India to achieve its development goals. So Mr. Shankar shows how we are trying to tap the potential of renewable energy, clean energy transition in India, the challenges that we are facing and how we are surmounting them, and how we are able to contribute to not only India's development through this process, but also to the larger global climate discussion, because India being 17, 18% of the global population, it matters, and third largest consumer of energy. So it matters for the global, discourse as much as it does for the domestic Indian within the country discourse. So I would not like to take any more of your time because we have a very eminent panel to discuss the book after Mr. Shankar has presented some highlights. And the very well-known panel of experts to discuss the book we have includes Professor Jyoti Parikh, who actually, I should have said in the beginning itself, this panel and this event has been put together jointly with her, with the IRADE, the think tank she heads, and she is also a key panelist. And Professor Parikh, the other day we learned from Mr. Nitin Desai that she is a theoretical physicist. And I never realized that she was, a theoretical physicist. And but she has been writing for many, many years on the environmental issues from earlier from the IGIDR, where she was, a very senior professor. And after coming to Delhi from IRADE, and so many writings and projects and, uh, you know, other activities that are done under her leadership. And then Mr. Arun Mehra, former member of Planning Commission, which is now transformed into Niti Aayog. Again, a very, very senior commentator on, uh, you know, industrialization and uh, development, and also clean energy transition. And he has been, distinguished in many capacities, including as management consultant and in the past, and we will know about his many talents. And then Mr. Girish Shetty from the TERI, our neighbor next door, but also I think you are based in the Habitat Center, so the original TERI location. And we also had the privilege of having Girish to speak at our conference recently in October. And so in the audience, there are many very senior people. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion this afternoon. But before I invite Mr. Ajay Shankar to share his thoughts about the book, let us have an unwrapping of the book by all of our speakers. So, thank you. So with that, let me invite Mr. Shankar to share his highlights of this book. Over to you.
Must begin by thanking you, Nagesh and Jyoti ji, for putting this event together. I'm privileged and honored. At the outset, let me make a somewhat strong statement, but it reflects reality. Uh, those of us who are not that young would remember seeing the film The Titanic, and everybody was partying away, and there was the iceberg, and the ship hit the iceberg, and practically everybody died. So global warming is the iceberg ahead of us. And we are partying away in the world, especially the advanced industrial economies. And if very drastic course correction does not take place, the survival of the human species is at risk. Now, this is not adequately center stage in the discourse in the advanced industrial economies. It's all about Trump, his tariffs, Ukraine war, China, etc., etc. Now, the science is becoming more scary because 1.5 degrees warming was the goal enunciated at Paris at 2015. The IPCC said that that is lost. Restricting it to 2 degrees is very difficult, which is if everybody does a lot. And business as usual, and with Trump's drill baby drill and so on and so forth, we don't know where we'll go. So that's the big backdrop. Now, we in India have been taking the view that we will do our best as we can, and we are a responsible country. And so we fought for and got the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities accepted in the international system. Now, Prime Minister Modi, I think, went against his own policy establishment in being not only a willing partner, but a contributor to the achievement of the Paris Accord. We made very ambitious announcements under the Paris Agreement. We have achieved all of them. And then in COP26, 2021, I think, he made the big announcement that India will become net zero by 2070. And then India has been party to the G20 statements, etc., which all talk about the world becoming net zero by 2050. So after he made the announcement, I started thinking about it. Colleagues in Terry looked at it, and we came up with some stuff. And finally, I thought it would be a good idea to come out with this book. Now, the title of the book in some ways reflects how my thinking, which is reflected in the book, has evolved. So, rising ambition means rising confidence. And the first 2 chapters in the book talk about what we have already achieved in this century. And these achievements are something which we can be legitimately very proud of. But there are so many other big things happening, so they don't get that kind of attention that they should get. And secondly, the policy instruments which made these successes possible. So chapter 1 describes our achievement of universal clean energy access, and chapter 2 describes our success in installation of solar power capacity. And both are a kind of policy case history of what we did and what worked and why it worked. Now, the book as a whole is much more about policy and policy choices. And it's a slender book for that reason. It doesn't give you too many numbers and doesn't even attempt modeling or arriving at some big ballpark number that you need so many $1 trillion. It doesn't do that. So in the first chapter, I describe how India began on a journey where it has achieved universal household access to electricity. Now, roughly 700 million people got access to electricity between 2007 and 2021, and which the International Energy Agency says is historically unprecedented. So we've done better than any other country in taking electricity so quickly to school. And in 2000, I remember drafting as a joint secretary a reply to a parliament question saying that at the current rate of electrification, Bihar would take over 700 years. And we had more people without access to electricity in India than Sub-Saharan. Now, Sub-Saharan Africa still remains where it was in terms of access. We have achieved universal access. So this is a huge achievement. And chapter 1 describes how to what are the policies. In chapter 2, I describe the success in the field of solar energy. When the National Solar Mission was launched, the price of solar power as approved by a regulatory commission was over 17 rupees. Today, it is less than 2.5 rupees in the market, or around 2.5 rupees. And India has the cheapest solar power in the market in the world, which is a huge achievement. And the solar capacity in addition in India has really taken off, and it can rise faster and is rising faster. Prime Minister's announcement of 500 GW or 500,000 megawatts of power capacity, which is still possible, is achieved and is being achieved. So that's the second big success story that is described in the second chapter. So the success gives confidence, and that confidence gives rise to what I call rising up. Now, the phrase carving new pathways I've chosen consciously because the first two chapters describe policy instruments and choices which were tailor-made for our situation and which allowed us to succeed. And that, I think, is a major learning, which then drives the discussion in the subsequent chapter of the book on how to get to net zero. Now, in the success in the solar mission, there were 3-4 unusual developments and successes and which need to be better understood. So the first is that this entire solar capacity in the country has been created by the private sector. The second is that this capacity has been created through competitive procurement. So there were competitive bids, tenders, and they kept coming out and rising in quantity, and that's how we. The third is that those who bid for these projects successfully, because of the design of the bidding process of a long-term power purchase agreement, saw de-risking of offtake of their production, because the entire quantity would be bought, and de-risking on the price front. This is a fixed price. So if they had not bid recklessly or rashly, then the project investment was de-risked almost fully, which is why they were able to raise finances without difficulty to complete their projects. And the experience of the last 15 years showed that the Indian economy is so well integrated into the global financial economy that raising money for any commercially viable investment in India has not been a problem till date. Consultants have been saying this for years, but this is one sector which has shown that if you have a viable project, money is not a constraint in India. It may be a constraint in other developing countries and so on, but for India, it has not been a constraint till date. And the final lesson was that competition is a very good thing. So this creation of a competitive industry structure has led to the emergence of new companies which are global giants today. And all because of the government policy of buying through competitive bids and scaling up gradually. So the lesson which is relevant for the journey forward is that market forces have to be used creatively to de-risk investment and then get the desired outcomes. And this only the government can do. Nobody else can do it, because otherwise market forces will give you desired outcomes on their own. After all, we are getting artificial intelligence through market forces. We are getting smarter and smarter forms. So if public interest desires that we want an outcome which the market forces are not giving us, then creativity lies in tapping market forces power of competition, the power of innovation in the market, and get the desired outcomes, and that only the government can. And in my view, the real failure of the West is that government has not taken leadership in driving climate change outcomes. Government has been content of talking about a carbon price and a carbon market, which are very feeble instruments in my view. And that is why the results are so modest. And now, after the second chapter, the third, fourth, fifth is a slender book, all describe the journey to net zero. Now, the journey to net zero has really two very broad streams of activity. One is that you electrify as much of the economy as possible, technically, and you make the electricity system free of carbon emissions. So whatever is electrified and the electricity system is carbon free gives you zero emissions. So that is what is discussed in chapters 3 and 4. And the important thing, which fortunately, again, India is ahead of the curve as far as the rest of the world is concerned, is in recognizing the imperative necessity of storing electricity. Because if you get solar power when the sun shines, and you need electricity more than what solar power gives you in the day because of air conditioning load or whatever, and you need electricity at night, then till you store electricity, you cannot meet all demand. And typically, if you lose, say, 20% of electricity storage, then you need to create 20% of storage capacity vis-a-vis solar capacity. So you create 1,000 megawatts of solar capacity, you need to create 1,200 megawatts of storage capacity. Now, here again, we are ahead of the curve. There is enough appetite in the market to create storage capacity. Only bids have to come out. And the very good news, and this is a remarkably positive development of the last, I think, 12 to 18 months, that the market discovered the price of storage is such that solar plus storage gives you electricity which is cheaper than from a new thermal power plant. So there is no commercial basis for building new thermal power plants, provided you can build enough solar capacity and storage capacity. Now, India can do that if it ramps up storage rapidly. And another positive development is the solar potential in India has turned out to be far higher than earlier estimated. So a rough ballpark figure, our per capita consumption can go up 10 times, and still we'll have enough potential for creating solar power and storage. So that's not a constraint today, which is again very positive. Now the margin between the price of solar and storage and new thermal is rising every month, and it's now over 50 paise. So the longer we delay the creation of solar storage capacity so as to stop building new thermal power plants, the longer we will be imposing an additional 50 paise per unit cost on consumers. Now, in parallel, we need electrification of as much of the economy as possible. Now, this is an untapped, uncharted territory. We are seeing enormous results in EVs. So EVs are succeeding in the Indian market, and hopefully they'll have full market share in the coming decades. But the use of electricity for industrial processes, for other activities is an early stage. For instance, you can shift a whole lot of steel production to arc furnaces where you use electricity. And you can import scrap steel and get green cars, green steel. So there's a lot of that which is discussed subsequently. But at the end of the day, there will still be sectors of the economy where electricity alone will not work. So those industrial processes will be carbon. Now here India has been forward looking, and we have a hydrogen mission in place for the last 2-3 years. So the hydrogen mission, if properly implemented, can bring us to the global frontier in terms of technology and costs in using green hydrogen to get industrial products without carbon emissions. Now, this is the really challenging frontier for the whole world. And I argue in the book, and I do believe it, that we have the capacity to reach the global frontier in both costs and technology if the state action is. And that state action, being smart enough, has to imbibe the lessons of the solar mission, which is de-risk investment in production of green hydrogen, de-risk investment separately in the use of green hydrogen for producing something which is used in the market, and handle the issue of the cost differential and how to navigate that differential and scale. So that is the analysis in the final chapter of the book. And the book ends with the proposition that achieving net zero is certainly doable. It is more affordable than we think it is. And that in the process of getting to net zero, we will achieve our other development goal of becoming a Vikasit Bharat, because we'll be on the global frontiers of a green economy, not the present economy, industrial economy, which anyway is in its twilight years. So our entry into the new green economy, we can leapfrog and be in the global. And that, I think, is a huge development opportunity for us, because say, if we accept CBM of Europe as something positive for us and come in the next budget with smart industrial policy and financing for helping Indian industry comply with CBM requirements, then we could start becoming a major exporter of manufactured goods to Europe. And I believe that the whole world needs a CBM to shift the fossil fuel-based industrial economy to a green carbon-free economy. In fact, I would even go further that civil society needs to argue that a CBM against the United States should be the subject of discussion, because they have chosen to actually sink mankind if they don't change because they're so large. So no matter what we do, if we become net zero by 47, and the United States continues on its present trajectory, mankind will not be safe. So I think the rest of the world needs to put an enormous pressure on the United States that you better change course, and they're not acceptable in the global community without change of course. After all, they can impose 50% tariffs on us. So action of a similar nature should at least come up in some cases. And my final point is that if we succeed, then we've done our bit to say, would be for the rest of the world to do that.
Thank you very much, sir, for very succinctly highlighting some of the key messages. And in particular, I think, you're emphasizing or emphasis on the government action, intervention, which is actually industrial policy, has played a very central role. And the countries which had all the pronouncements but no action or intervention in support of those pronouncements did not achieve. So I think that is one very important, key message coming from the book, among many other, very important lessons that India's experience provides. Now that with that, let us open it up to our very distinguished panelists, and Professor Jyoti Parekh is on my list as the first panelist. So over to you. Whether you. Oh, okay. So in that case, Mr. Mehra. No, but that you can come back anyway in the end. So yeah, so can as well do it. Come back if that's what you want. I can hear her. She wants to hear everything in that moment. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's. I said you want to do it at the end. No, then go ahead. Go ahead. I
felt when I was reading this book. Um, Well, we are all working in this area, so he is like a colleague also from that point of view. And so he has been party to the same debates that we are answering. And one of the major one is that India's ambition is not just to the extent of India's commitment to COP, but it's also how good for India's future, and that he repeatedly emphasizes it, and that is true to most extent. Sometimes we have to go ahead with coal plants and so on, so that also that realism is something that he has as well. And uh, the the items he mentioned about de-risking prices and private sector has deeper roots in his own work of the last few decades, where he has himself been a party to Electricity Act and then banking of the power and also several others. Wait a minute, one major one I was impressed is this design of implementation of solar mission. And in all these, he has uh, emphasized private sector participation. And all these things may look very obvious at this stage, but it wasn't that time. And there were so many government organizations managing energy sector that to speak in this way was considered new. And right now, you all assume that that's how it's done. It wasn't simple. And that leads to me, leads me to one more aspect is that we should think about also history of policies, how they came about, and what was the circumstances in the in which the policies were made, and how various people pushed the envelope in our journey to not only decarbonization but for many other things. In fact, I feel similar things should be done for pollution management, and much of the lessons we could have learned, we have not learned, but that's for some another day. Um, so this is a short book compared to what he knows, but and he has briefly summarized it. The unassuming person that he is, he has not linked to his own role in policies, but so that's why I pointed this out a little more explicitly. And we also have to think about long-term future that is there, and storage is very much important. But perhaps in the next book you can also mention power markets, and I think he is the right person to write a policy history book as well. So you have many books more to write, and he is so prolific. He just keeps writing. This column, that column, this paper, that paper. You can't keep up with him. So he's an asset to energy sector. And I'm sure this book will do very well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for planting the seeds of some other books. I thought this was more than enough.
Well, thank you, Madam Parik. We will come back to you. And of course, you will make closing remarks at the end as a co-organizer. I think I fully endorse, your idea that we expect many more books from Mr. Shankar, including on policy sides, and he's also writing on industrial policy.
That's separate.
Yes. So he rides on two horses and at the same time. So now let me turn to Mr. Arun Mehra. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Ajay, and I have got to know each other in the context of industrial policy. When I was in the Planning Commission and Dr. Krishnamurti was chairman of the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council. And since I was member for industry in the Planning Commission, it was like a ex officio, I must be with him. Of course, I'd known him a long time since I'd worked with Tatas, building an Indian industry with Indian product suppliers, technology in the same field, automobiles. And he joined Maruti and brought in Suzuki. And so, honestly, he and I were friends, and we used to have private discussions about what India could do, learning from Tata's experience, which he said even needs to absorb into the way Maruti is built. So I was there, so we were very close, as you remember. We'd always say, come and sit here and whisper during the NMCC meetings. And Ajay joined as member secretary, sat on the other side, I don't know which side it was, but the other. And we used to have these meetings. And it was a challenge. The point is, it was a challenge. The paradigm was not industrial policy. At that time, Jyoti, Kirit had been in the Planning Commission. Industrial policy was a very bad word. It was a bad idea, not a bad word only, a bad idea. So we were together in working against the tide. And Ajay has written a book showing that, and you said so, that given the constraints in the ideological and political system around you, you have to find the clever little things, the little nudges that you can take, which start to produce the sort of results that you want. And your book describes them very well. It's a description with facts supporting them, not description, analysis with facts supporting it, about how you look at the various forces in a system, the ideological, political forces, financial forces, in all the policies that you made. It's not just the pure technology. The policy cannot be just a technology. So please do read the book from that perspective. Now, Ajay, you did say, you used the metaphor of the Titanic, that this ship, which is the whole world actually, is sailing on a course and busy doing lots of policies and COPs and stuff, which is not changing the course. Everyone is rearranging, as the famous metaphor goes, the deck chairs on the Titanic, the new furnishings, and feeling quite good that we've had another round of agreements on what further improvements we're going to make in the way things are laid out within the structure of the ship and in the direction which it is sailing. And you use the word as the introduction, and noted it down, that we need drastic course correction, not an adjustment in the course, but a drastic change of the course. We need a paradigm shift, an ideological paradigm shift, a correction. She is a physicist. You introduced her as an eminent physicist. I know he and I know each other. We both did theoretical physics. So, friends, you've got 3 theoretical physicists sitting here talking to you about technologies of climate change. So we know the physics of those technologies quite well. And in the course of our work, his work, he's already explained, and Jyoti's work, we've learned about the politics around climate change also. So there's a physics of climate change and there's an economics of climate change. And since we are physicists and you all non-physicists have heard Einstein's famous expression that if you continue to work harder to solve a big problem that has been caused by your present way of thinking and keep using the present way of thinking, you better go get your head examined. And I'm going to put it like that. I think, I'm sure, let me convince you about it, that all our solutions towards climate change are within the present paradigm. It's a techno-economic paradigm of solving the problem. So we need to take a broader systems view and to understand the physics of climate change, as well as the economics of climate change. So let me take the physics, since I mentioned Einstein, and Einstein's famous for E is equal to mc squared. What is E is equal to mc squared? It says the whole world is one thing. It has mass and energy, and the mass gets converted to energy at a constant ratio, And yes, the energy can be combined again into mass. It's a circulation of mass and energy with a fixed ratio of conversion. Plus, the whole is limited. You can't create new energy without new mass. In the earth, therefore, on the earth, all the renewable energy that we have is actually being derived out of the same mass. Yes, so, and I've studied the physics of this, whether it's wind energy or hydropower, we get it out in large scales by disturbing the infrastructure of the earth itself, which then has a second order effect on the earth's ability to maintain the balance between energy, mass, and its configurations itself. So you can see the disasters that come. The only renewable energy, it's not renewable, the only new energy that we get is from the sun, because that's another big body which is consuming its mass to produce energy, thank goodness, and we receive it and bless ourselves for having the sun shining on us. So just think about this. The word productivity is the word that connects now the technology and the use of technology with the economy. The economists are pursuing and continuing to pursue improvement of the productivity of economies as the means to grow the economies and to produce more wealth for individuals, that the individuals' productivity per capita should be more, and then the whole productivity of a whole economy is larger. So what is the measure of productivity here? Less human energy to produce the output. So therefore, we are always using non-human energy, more and more of it, to improve the productivity of the economy. Yes, individuals also benefit in two ways. One of them is in their work, perhaps. They could get their work done more easily with the machine that uses energy. It's nice. And at home also, like the Americans, more and more devices, which all are using energy, electricity, could be renewable also, and less for you to do yourself. It's a nice lifestyle also. So the use of non-human energy is considered progress. Except now, we've come to the point we say, where will the jobs be for people who only have human energy? And that was bad enough when I was in the Planning Commission, labor-intensive industries. Now, with artificial intelligence, even the human intelligence in economic enterprises is not necessary. It is being produced by some artificial, word is artificial intelligence. But this artificial intelligence also needs real energy. And where does that energy come from? And you could see massive server farms. And the amount of energy that they need is not coming from the sun, not in the near term. Where is all that energy coming from? And you can see that. And water also, they need to cool themselves. So keep this in mind. When we think about solutions which are going to be continuously sustainable, not short-term, achieve something and then say, gosh, we've created another problem for ourselves. In the case of the use of, we're talking about artificial intelligence, it is, like I said, also damaging the material energy balance of the earth right now. So productivity measurement, artificial intelligence, this is going to increase productivity, take more people and the intelligence out. How are people going to earn anything if they don't get an opportunity within an economic enterprise to be paid for applying their labor or the energy in the economic enterprise? So if a corporation is going to be run without any people and produce a lot of output, who's going to buy the corporation's product? This is the problem for the corporation and capitalism. But for us, in a country like us, we say, we can't afford these lovely, great things unless we can earn for ourselves. So Ajay's book puts this problem very clearly, as the United Nations has recognized. Oh, sorry, I've read your book, so it's so well marked all over, but pages and pages. So chapter one, after this preface, says achieving universal access. The Sustainable Development Goal number 7 is ensure access to affordable, reliable, affordable, and modern energy. Now, when you talk about affordable, if someone is not earning enough to afford maybe enough food, where is the money to pay for more energy? So to have an aspirational lifestyle in which you can use green products, you don't have the money even to buy your food. Where are you going to buy these from a corporation or from the private sector, these products? So this comes to Jyoti, my impression in the Planning Commission, I know Nagesh and we talked about it, that the private sector by design cannot produce public goods, because a private enterprise, corporation enterprise, is created under law to maximize the returns for its investors only. It's enjoined by law to do that. We are seeing the consequences of it repeatedly, and the failure of the board of Indigo is a good example. Most efficient, world class, all pleased we were if the service, if available. And what happened? Because yes, it was admired by, in the economic world, its share prices have been growing. It was drawing more investments to itself. But was it socially responsible? Well, the board can say, like I've been on boards. In the board, keep out your social philosophies. This is a capitalist corporation. You please stick to making this more successful. So I do fear that reducing the production of more public goods, which should be freely available to everybody, like the right to food. And we've said so, the right to energy, it says so, is a universal right. Whether you have got zero income or you're Mr. Musk, you're entitled to a certain minimum amount of energy. And what's the minimum again? If the whole society is going to produce more stuff that requires energy, then you're going to need even more energy. So we're getting ourselves stuck into a vicious circle unless we change a couple of ideologies. But let me put that out for you. Now, it's not just energy that human beings need in our country or in poorer countries or rich countries also for life. We need water even more basically. Water is even more basic to life, for all life, than is air and energy. So when we are worrying about pollution in the air, we have been noticing for the last 30, 40 years how India's water sources are diminishing, getting contaminated. There has been more disease and more deaths due to poor water, which we now seem to be putting aside in the pursuit of a zero carbon goal, because that's the fashion. And Western science says to them that's the most important thing. So we are adopting it. And if they say we'll give you an incentive under carbon prices, we'll go along with you. But you've said very well, Ajay, and I want you to say all this. He said it. He said, we, India, can show the way. But if you have to show the way, it can't be the same way. But we'll be very fast adopters of your way. It can't be that. It will have to be a different way. Solar, you mentioned, industrial policy is linked with that. Now, when I was in the Planning Commission, we were pursuing, and you were probably out of the industry ministry at the time, and before you joined the NNCC, you were in your sabbatical in the US. We had a policy to, well, use solar because, as you said, the benefits of it, and it's the right right new energy to use, but to produce it, the stuff to produce it, we were importing from China, and they were huge. Now, we don't want to be dependent on China. So we wanted to produce, and just like industrial policy, why can't you make it yourself if you're going to be the largest buyer of solar equipment? So we had a policy in the Ministry of Renewable or Industry together to say that we are going to insist that if you're going to be given the rights to this land to put up some solar panels, you will have to buy the equipment made in India, initially assembled. Where will the panels come from? From China, the silicon panels from China. The US objected, right? They objected. They said the silicon wafer panels are not as efficient as a new technology called the thin film technology. The thin film technology was not, frankly, not as efficient, but yes, sounded less material and more modern. It was being produced by a single US firm called First Solar. And it was the US government, as it always does, it pushes along with a particular enterprise or enterprises. Their US trade policy is a corporate policy. And so it was First Solar. So we, of course, went to the WTO and all the rest of it, but we didn't quite win it. And however, First Solar failed, and we were stuck now. We had lost all those years. And meanwhile, China had grown to such an extent that today, friends, China's exports of renewable energy products are larger than the exports of hydrocarbon products of the United States of America. And the United States is still trying to control hydrocarbon markets and pushes hydrocarbon exports. And China, therefore, it says, to heck with you. If this is the future, we, by industrial policy, are going to do it. So I finally want to say that we must be faster learners. And what happened to us in India, if I could say, that we stopped learning too early. We stopped learning around 1991, when we were told they've got the best. Why do you want to struggle and be more expensive and you'll get it wrong, won't be high quality? Buy it from us and your people will be very pleased. They'll get the latest products and dumped on you, low prices. Theek hai, aspiration ho gaya hai. China didn't. It wasn't restricting its learning by the Western ideology, free trade, no industrial policy, e-markets. The Chinese, it has got the markets, as people say. In the electric car industry, the market within China is ruthless. It's not a government produced, but it's ruthless. But industrial policy, they have been supporting and will continue to support with a large amount of government money, all the infrastructure required for particular industries, which includes electric vehicles industry. And if you allow me one last, I'm a politician sometimes. Today, the Supreme Court has said that in the matter of Delhi and the pollution, that the small cars, which the auto industry has been, Maruti saying, please allow more small cars to get the incentives for less polluting cars. But electric cars people, Tesla's in the background, say, no, an electric car is far more environmentally friendly. Yes, locally within Delhi, if you use an electric car, you may cause less pollution, but your electric car is drawing power from where? It's not generating it itself. It's coming from somewhere. And the product of the electric car, the batteries to use it, they are damaging the environment somewhere else, and not here. So when I saw last week a person in Delhi, Gurgaon, driving a big Tesla with a green number plate, feeling very holy, big vehicle, and pushing aside the motorcyclists and everything, and all saying, wow, Tesla aa gayi, modern technology. Thank goodness India is opening up to the latest technology for green. Friends, he is creating more impact on the environment, this gentleman, per capita, than the poor fellow on the motorcycle or in the small car. And that's what the Supreme Court said. If you come to SDG 7, I'm saying, it's about human rights. And so in the whole transition to renewable energy for the whole world, we have to realize this, that we may do our bit, and I'm glad we all clapped. If wo nahi karenge, to hum karenge zarur. It's not just for our good, we say, it's for your good. Okay? But they're getting away with it still. And pollution, particularly, that's going to come to that, water may not be so, it's coming from everywhere. I could be in Singapore and saying I'm managing my traffic and everything, but from Indonesia and elsewhere, the pollution is going to come. It will not respect the border. So they must change their course. And we have to be on the top of it and saying, you must learn from us a new way of doing it. And please, let's learn from China also. Thanks for my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mehra, for your very insightful comments. I think a couple of things which stand out in my mind is that broader systems view is needed to handle the issue of climate change, and the solutions are there, but we need to really the coordinated view we have to take, systems view, which management, people are more familiar with. And the other thing, which again, very much coming out of your remarks, is that which is received wisdom and in economics, that because of market failures, the private sector doesn't do the public goods, or will not invest in creation of public goods. And so the emphasis on industrial policy is really very much needed. And fortunately, government has been taking some steps, as the book shows. And you also reminded us to this the WTO case that US brought against India on these local content requirements, when we initially tried to make inroads into making of solar equipment in India. And that was a big setback, I think that case was. But now we are moving ahead with a greater determination, and hope to become self-reliant in production of at least panels in the coming year. So there are many issues concerning the climate transition, that are needed to be taken up and forcefully implemented. So with that, let me turn to our final panelist, Mr. Girish Reddy. Is a senior director at TERI, which is a world-famous institution on climate change and energy-related issues. And Mr. Sethi has been directing a lot of research on these issues. So I'm sure he will be able to also share some of very insightful views. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. I think it's really my privilege to be part of this esteemed panel comprising of Professor Jyoti Parikh and sir, I think Mr. Mehra, and of course Mr. Rajesh Shankar, who has been a part of the TERI's distinguished fellow family. And let me also admit at the outset that I have been privileged to see some of the sections of this book early on when it was in the manuscript stage, and going through some of the discussions with Mr. Rajesh Shankar, while of course learning from him on a very regular basis as a part of many other research projects and papers which he has authored while working with us here. So broadly, what I would just like to spend the next 5-7 minutes, basically from the perspective of this book, the way it has come out, and the way the thought process which Mr. Rajesh Shankar basically explained. So to put it in a very simplistic way, I think, and I think he has elaborated it very nicely in the last section of this framework, which he has said, that once we electrify everything to the extent possible, and if we make the electricity fossil-free, make it green using renewables, then at least that part of it is taken care of. Whether it is being used in the buildings where we are sitting, or it is being used in the household, or wherever we are using. So one has to really accelerate the process of making the electricity system fossil-free. And to that extent, I think the way there is a separate emphasis in the document totally on storage, because solar and wind is not 100%. We know only the electricity can be produced when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. And of course, nuclear is also something which is being talked, which he has also referred to. But the fact is that the importance of storage, whether it is in the form of the battery energy storage, or whether it is the pumped energy storage, or any other form of storage, that becomes central to kind of making the electricity system fossil-free. So that is the key emphasis which I really see in this part of it. On the demand side, if we really look at it, I think if we look at, I think there are sections in this document, and we have discussed this many times, I think everybody knows, simply that if we are looking at the transport sector, I think, sir, everybody really talked about it. And as in India, I think specifically we are moving clearly onto electric vehicle segment, and we can see, I think, in whether it's two-wheelers, three-wheelers, the intra-city transport in Delhi and all, we can see, I think most of the buses will be electric. But I think maybe on the transport, the major story remains still a question mark, if at all it remains, is on heavy-duty transport systems, how fast we can move there, or whether it's the hydrogen is going to make a dent in that area. The other sectors are really clearly moving where it is electrification is possible. But I think the big story which Mr. Shankar also mentioned towards the end of his introductory remarks was the industry sector. And I think this book very clearly refers to that in two sections, in the second last as well as in the last one. I would just like to spend next 3-4 minutes in talking about the industry sector as a whole. More so also because I do spend a lot of time working with the industrial sector as a whole and looking at energy paradigm within the industries. Broadly, if we look at it, industry consumes 50% of the total India's energy consumption. Total energy consumption, 50% mota is industrial sector. And within the industry sector, if we really do, and we have been discussing that, and to me, almost 70 to 80% of the total energy consumed within the industries is actually in the form of heat. It is not in the form of electricity. Even if we electrify the entire electricity, what do we do with the heat? So, and to that extent, I think there is an emphasis somewhere in the document, I think in the book, where he has talked about, I think, the role of electrification. How do we electrify heat in the industries? And to me, that is something which will be very important moving forward as a country. That, and not just in India, I think globally as well, I would think the emphasis has to be on electrification. Europe has moved to a certain extent on heat pumps and things like that. But in India, I think we need to really move forward. But to me, that's again a policy dimension which will really have to come in, because we as an economy, as we see, and since I work so closely with the industrial sector and we go to the factories and go and interact with the entrepreneurs on a very regular basis, it's not very easy for an entrepreneur to really, even if the technology is available, to shift to electricity. Simply because the price structure does not really match today. Our electricity prices are far, far higher as compared to, we know very well that the industrial and the commercial sector is kind of cross-subsidizing the other agriculture and even now the domestic sector as well to a certain extent. So to me, the electrification of heat, if we are talking here in the whole story, if we have to move, and irrespective of that, even where the technologies are available, I think that will really have to make a huge difference to a certain extent. And many a times, one can talk about, yes, processes are 24/7. So you can't really work only for 8-9 hours. Most of the industries work 24/7 and they need electricity and heat 24/7. So there again, even today, maybe in the years to come, yes, battery energy storages and other things, if that happens, the prices come down. But as of today, it is really a big challenge practically. So I just wanted to flag that point, which is extremely relevant if we are talking about it. And then I think the second last bit which I wanted to mention was, I think again within the industry paradigm is the story of, as Mr. Rajesh Shankar mentioned, that whatever can be electrified, it's okay. But whatever cannot be electrified, things like hydrogen has to be important. So there is a full chapter on hydrogen. And I think I take the credit of having all these discussions with Rajesh Shankar when we were discussing about the story of, yes, we do have the hydrogen mission in India. The SIDE program, there's a huge emphasis of around 18,000 crores has been earmarked for the hydrogen mission. But still we are 2 years down the line, we are still struggling in terms of getting the demand for green hydrogen. So till the time we don't really get the demand right, I think we will continue facing this problem. And I do see Mr. Rajesh Shankar writing very clearly here in this conventional support mechanisms like the strategic interventions for green hydrogen transition program or the PLI scheme may not deliver the desired outcomes in the absence of a market for green hydrogen and products made from it. So to me, that's extremely important, how we really design the next set of things within the whole scheme of things to really get the green steel and the green hydrogen moving forward, if we want to really be the first movers at least within the developing world. Of course, in Europe, we are talking about green steel by Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Germany, they are all doing that together. So that's extremely important to me, I think, as we move forward in that regard. And finally, I think just one point, I think very briefly he has mentioned, I know Mr. Shankar has plans to write other books. We had some discussions if he really gets the time to do that. But to me, I think another element which is extremely important is the whole, since we are in ISID, sir, I think the whole story of SMEs here. And I think even just with one example of the electric vehicle industry, we look at Pune, look at Aurangabad, look at Chennai now. I think the entire cities, the entire regions are actually around the automobile sector. And once we are moving away from the fossil fuel based vehicle industry to an electric car driven, and I have read somewhere, I'm not an expert on the automobile, but the moving parts are so little. So how are we going to manage this entire transition of the workforce in this big SME segment in many of the Indian industrial hubs across the country in western and southern parts of India? So with these words, I'll just stop here and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sethi, for flagging number of important issues, especially on industrial decarbonization, which is of great interest to us in ISID. And you're right in pointing out that a lot can be achieved by electrification of heat in the industry, but where it is not possible, then alternative feedstocks like green hydrogen have to be looked at. And the last point which you made is actually very, very important. This transition to electric vehicles has this, possibility or challenge of putting lot of MSMEs which produce these components for which go into the normal conventional vehicles. They becoming out of job. So that is something, a major transition we have to handle. So with that we have heard our distinguished panelists. I want to throw it open to anyone who wants to raise any issue, and then we'll turn back to the panel, and including Mr. Shankar may want to respond to some of the points made by the speakers also. So who wants to go? Sure, please. Please introduce yourself. Yeah, it is on. It's on. Yeah.
I'm Pankaj Batra, senior advisor IRADE, and former chairperson CEA. So we did a study while I was in IRADE on comparing electric vehicles to fossil fuel vehicles, the complete life cycle. Because many people said that, what about the manufacture of battery? That also consumes emissions. So even if you use fossil fuel for producing batteries, we worked out that electric vehicle is more efficient than a fossil fuel vehicle in its totality, whether you compare for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So that we've done in terms of also efficiency of the electric vehicle, which is over 90%, whereas for a fossil fuel, it's around 20% or less. So considering all these aspects, we've done this study. So what you mentioned about large vehicles using EVs. So I think large vehicles using EVs have to be compared with large vehicles using fossil fuels. Anyway, that's something, because otherwise it's not apple to apple comparison.
Yes, exactly.
Or a small vehicle using EV to a small vehicle using fossil fuel.
Nice, yeah.
In either case, EV is emits less emissions, even if you take the cost of production, because we did this through scientific methods on manufacture of batteries. That's one. And I think, the human mind is pretty, pretty agile in terms of, especially in India. So I think we've got a big future ahead, bright future ahead. So even if AI comes, so even now, if in terms of intelligence, very few people do innovations as compared, and most of the others. So it's about 10% leaders and 90% followers in terms of, even in terms of technology, not only here, internationally. So in AI, it replicates the one which is non-innovative. I mean, that's what we should use it for, not the innovative part. So that there was a saying that somebody put on the thing, that I use my intelligence for the non-innovative part, artificial intelligence, not for the innovative part. So that's just a help for that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Harsh, you want to come?
Thank you. Very, very absorbing and useful, I think. And you pointed out or reiterated the importance of demand, which he had talked about. In fact, the solar panel in China grew because Germany created a large demand for it. And the 2 points which you made, that in the context of lessons, that de-risk on the price and quantity front through policy, if it is possible. I wonder how many sectors one can cover this with. Can we do it for the solar sector, for example, solar panel sector? And Mr. Mehra, thank you very much. As usual, you have given lots of room for new thought. You said that all our solutions are within the current paradigm. I just feel we'll have to function in the current paradigm for some time, but your point is very relevant, that we need to go outside it. Can you give some examples of going outside the current paradigm that can then lead one to think about it more creatively? Thank you.
It is wonderful to hear from the experts various views on a very challenging topic, particularly from Ajay Shankar Saab, Mehra Saab, and Nagesh Kumar, Shetty, Ms. Patil. But we also need at this stage to reduce the consumption of electricity or energy per se. We seem to think that per capita consumption of energy, electricity is low in India. We must, improve the quality of life, we must increase the energy content. Time has come to reduce the energy needs by building smaller buildings, avoiding climate change. There is a proliferation of climate change. From the time I was in student days to now, I have seen in every area there is a climate change equipment put, which is not really very necessary because the public is used to that. These type of measures need to be introduced or not being introduced. The other area is there are technologies like carbon capture and utilization. In Chennai, there is a case of a factory called the Tuticorin Alcaris. It is buying carbon dioxide from hydrogen power generating plant almost free and making it into soda ash. Today, Tata Chemicals in Europe is setting up similar plant in UK with viability gap funding, where they're making it to pharma grade for kidney treatments and all that. You get very purity. So we need to look in what products you can make from carbon dioxide, though they may be limited. For example, plastics are a great absorber of carbon, provided you don't recycle it, in which case the carbon comes out. So could you use for a longer time? I find in these areas, things are not progressing. Our R&D is weak. Whatever we may say, India is not a technology leader, it is a good technology follower. We take the technology, handle it very well, apply. So something needs to be done on the R&D side. It should be outcome-based, all these support. There are a large number of scientific institutions, research institutions. There are more mollies than scientists, as surveys showed. I think a different approach is required in this area. Secondly, renewable energy has a limitation. I'm told not more than 2000 JW is possible because land constraints, many issues are coming up. So we have to go to clean energy for nuclear now. So I think reduction is equally important by habitat planning, reducing commuting, At least the new cities and township extensions should follow schools in that area. Compulsory that children will have to go to that school so that buses don't fly about throughout Delhi as we see today. In midday, it is impossible to go in Delhi. There's another traffic jam to school buses. These are some of my views. I've been interacting even with Rajesh Shankar Saab on so many occasions. This is an area of weakness. Maybe it is a difficult area, therefore the politician also does not want to touch it. And pricing for AC should be much more. Already there is a lot of wastage in so-called electricity distribution and thefts. It's a pseudonym for thefts. But over and above that, we are giving the same electricity, they should be charged more. A differential pricing is required between minimum limits and after that using. That can easily be done with the time of the day metering and all. This is my view.
If I got reminded, in the solar sector of China, the second leg it stood on was reverse engineering and R&D. So now Indians are not bad at reverse engineering. So what is the Indian government doing in terms of the reverse engineering part of the solar panels? If you can just tell us about that.
Sir, we know that the industrial policy and the government, so we know that the industrial policy and the government interventions have resulted in the development of a good solar panel industry in India. So now it seems it is facing the issue of overcapacity. So recently there was a news report which is saying that in 2025, the manufacturing capacity is 125 gigawatts, which is 3 times the demand in the country. So that means this industry is going to face an overcapacity issue. So possibly what the government can do to address this issue so that this industry sustains itself in the long term.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bela. I'm a PhD scholar from IIT Delhi. I have 2 questions. The first thing is, as you mentioned that one of the pathways that we can adopt is that storing electricity, right, sir? But I wanted to understand where are we in terms of our capacity, in terms of developing the storing capacity, sir? Because for instance, even if India has a great exposure in terms of sunlight, but during the monsoons where the skies are overcast for a relatively larger period of time, how do we address that issue in those durations? And the second question that I have is that while the government makes a commitment of achieving a target of net zero by 2070, however, there are instances happening in the areas like Madhya Pradesh and Odisha wherein the forested land is being given to the industrialists for extraction of coal. Sir, so how are these 2 actions, the commitment that is being made of net zero and the action that is happening on ground, the 2 don't seem to be in harmony, sir? So how will the government address that?
Thank you. If there are no other comments or questions, then I want to turn back to the speakers. Oh, yeah. Oh, please. Yes.
Good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Malti Goyal. I am former advisor, Department of Science and Technology. So that is my introduction. I must compliment Shri Ajay Shankar ji for this very, very relevant and very, very important contribution he's made. Very timely contribution, I would say, because I'm not going to be technical at all. Of course, there are many issues raised here. So I thought I've known him for when he was Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power. because energy R&D has been a passion for me for long, and we were having collaboration on carbon sequestration, as sir has mentioned. So carbon sequestration, I met him in that connection first, and I always took him as an IAS officer. So I never thought that he would have such a vast knowledge to bring out a book. But he has been a very kind and person. I especially also thank Dr. Parikh, who has been sort of a very positive approach. He's sort of my role model, I can say, because whenever we go, we think, who is your role model? So in science, their academicians are different, but then you have to have a blend. I'm learning now that academy is part is one and the marketing part is another. So that's where I think I really respect ma'am to be always having a very positive approach. Mera Sahab, of course, everybody knows you. I just wanted to share one thing. In 2024, we started a lecture series on climate change and net zero, because I also do some social work like Climate Change Research Institute, who is doing such kind of activities to make the people known about what climate change is and actually understand it, not what it is written in the UN books or anything, but what it is. So this series was actually meant for school children, thinking that they were going to be the actual persons in 2070. So this was the aim of the, and my first lecture was, of course, from a professor from IIT Delhi on electrical vehicles. So, I mean, we had touched very many different topics, plastic pollution, the wetlands, things like that. I mean, many such things. But I'm not going to detail of that. But what I wanted to share, the concept of net zero, which is very important. Net zero is not zero emission. That is what we have to understand. So when we talk of carbon sequestration, it automatically becomes relevant because you have to have so many, so much of things and so much of generation that both are balanced to net zero. So that's the key point. That's why we cannot just go on for renewable energy also, because renewable energy, we say no emission, so that means we can go on. But we cannot, we have to think of both the aspects of it. So that's the most important point which I really shared, and then we talked about many other things. I can go on and on. Thank you so much. I think it is a very interesting and very, very, very important topic you have touched. Thank you.
I think one point she made was that she thought she was an IAS officer. But how? So the general perception of bureaucracy. Yeah. So, so not so such a charitable remark for your cadres and colleagues, but certainly it is very unusual to find a bureaucrat who is such a storehouse of knowledge and deep understanding and who can reflect on that like an academician and a policymaker. So with that, let us turn to our speakers, and maybe we go in the same order, sir, or whatever. Yeah, so go ahead.
My first point is that some of the questions that have been raised have been answered in the book. So I'd strongly urge you to read it. It's a slender book, barely 200 pages. And I was complimented by him that it is easy to read for somebody who's not in the field. It's available on Amazon, and maybe somebody will be here outside also, so you can pick it up. A few major points which I would like to touch upon. The book talks about manufacturing. And the domestic content requirement was put in by me because I had the privilege of designing the solar mission when I was about to retire, and the MNRE said that you be the chairman of the committee as a person, not as secretary to the IPP. Anyway, and you're right, the Americans destroyed it. So if we want to look at manufacturing seriously, Then there is the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is true not only of India, but the whole world, that China has become the most efficient, most competitive manufacturer of just about everything under the sun, from high technology to low technology. So we are seeing Europe to begin with, and now US under Trump doing what developing countries used to do, impose high tariffs to save domestic industry and domestic jobs. 40% tariffs. That's what Trump began with. Now, if you look at the global picture, the maximum growth and demand will be in India in the coming decade. We are one-sixth of mankind with very low per capita incomes. Whether we like it or not, this per capita income will rise. And therefore, demand will rise. And so every big company in the world is looking at the demand in the Indian market. Now, the Chinese are the most efficient manufacturers in the world. Then ideal economic equilibrium is our demand, their surplus efficient capacity, a perfect match. And India-China trade reflects that. It's the trade of East India Company with the British Empire. Now, is that acceptable to India? Should it be acceptable to India? And if it is not acceptable to India, then we have to go back to the drawing board and think what to do. And now, in the book, I have argued that you have to accept, and that argument is relevant for any part of the economy. You have to accept that you want to make something today, you cannot make it as efficiently and as cheaply as China does. So as a country, you have to make the choice that you'll be prepared to pay a little more and learn how to make it efficiently and cheaply and become as good as China. Now that will not happen with market forces being left alone. So what I have argued here, and it can replicate it anywhere, is that as with the bids for solar power, we can go out for bids in the market saying that you put up a new plant, you do full value addition for solar panels in India, from silicon to everything. The plant should have 1000 megawatt capacity, which is the industrial size of a plant today for solar panels. And we will buy your entire output for 15 years. So I have de-risked your investment fully, no matter what the L1 price is, as long as it is transparent. After all, we bought solar power at 12 rupees a unit. Thermal power was only 4.5 rupees a unit. So if solar panels bought with full value addition in India gives me solar power at 4 rupees, it is still cheaper than thermal, though much more expensive than imported Chinese panels at 2.5 rupees. But till as a country we decide to pay that higher price, we will not succeed in manufacturing. So that's the hard decision which people of India have to take. And it's a political economy decision. So you look at the US, why is Trump popular? He's popular because he's tapped into the unhappiness and anger of the American working class, which have lost their jobs over the last 40 years, and the real wages are flat. Now, India is in a far more precarious position because there's a huge young population. And their incomes, their real wages and their employment opportunities are not rising the way they should rise. I'm getting a bit old, so I had never imagined that in prosperous states of Maharashtra, Haryana, I would see political agitation for reservation in government jobs. I thought the era of government jobs giving employment was over with 91 reforms. So we are not succeeding in creating jobs. And we are also therefore increasing inequality, because ours is a very unequal hierarchical society, and all our incomes and jobs are coming in the global competitiveness centers of the MNCs, where we are the global leaders. And in the last 15, 20 years, the upper middle class has really grown at a very rapid pace, and which is what has made life good in these metros for those of us who have cash in our pockets. But this is completely unsustainable till we succeed in manufacturing. And we will succeed only if government is willing to shift the political economy in favor of job creation and production rather than consumption. And now this is easier said than done. When you want to spell out the policy in some details, it's a complex task. But that's a major point which I had not made in my remarks, but is made in the book, and I repeat it. Now, the other major point which I want to elaborate a little is that you have market forces. And I've argued that de-risking investment gives us good results. And I've answered your question partly of how to de-risk investment in manufacturing. No. And on the other side, you have a public need, a public good. So my starting premise is that I have to bridge the distance creatively between the efficiency gains of competition and market forces, which give us lower prices, innovation, and so on and so forth. And I get a public good outcome, which I want, but which market forces left to themselves will not give us. And in the second chapter of this book, I've explained how we succeeded with solar panels. So 17 rupees price, 12 rupees first year tender price, and then in few years it comes down to less than thermal power price because globally technology was moving. So we have to repeat that in the industrial sector, and in the book I've spelled it out at some length. I'll be happy to discuss it once you all have gone through it, because otherwise I have spent a little more time. But the key is de-risking production of green hydrogen, de-risking the use of green hydrogen for producing something which we will use, which is steel, fertilizer, etc. Now, there is this question of R&D. In R&D, it's a little more complex and nuanced, and I think one needs to think a little more deeply. So the first point is that there is a global market for technology. It's still a free open market. And therefore, Indian firms have been choosing to buy technology in the global market to produce for the Indian market. And MNCs anyway develop their technologies and bring it here. So there is the common refrain that we are not doing enough in R&D, we are not spending enough in R&D. Now, the answer to that is not in blaming Indian industry or giving them lectures, because, as you rightly said, they look after their shareholder returns and they will not do it. So here again, there is space for government to come in creatively. And the only way government can come in creatively is to accept the induction of state-of-art technology in the country by domestic firms as well as foreign firms. And thereafter, starting on that base, support innovation and R&D. Now, that is not happening in India at all. So even defense PSUs, they buy technology, produce, but they don't do any R&D to get beyond that, nor have BHL done it. So, but to do that creatively, you need the domain knowledge and the capacity to understand where marginal innovation can take place, which will give you huge commercial returns. And that is the huge lesson from East Asia. Japan took a long, long time, but they picked up technology from the rest of the world and then worked wonders in cost. I mean, imagine a country becoming an exporter of steel, which has neither iron ore nor coal. And the Chinese have done it in recent years. But we will get there only if we have smart industrial policy, which is focused on technology development. And that cannot be done by IS officers. It has to be done by people who understand technology at the cutting edge. And there I'm sorry to say that India is still a poor developing country. We don't have many people who understand technology at the cutting edge in the world. We have enough NRIs who do it. I wish the government would decide that we'll get at least 100 NRIs at the cutting edge of frontier technologies back to the country, no matter what it costs. A poor India could get Homi Bhabha. A poor India could get Slocum to build Bhakra Nangal. A poor India could get Corbusier to build Chandigarh. And last 10 years, who have we got in India to lead anything big? And they're all people who would be happy to come back and serve the country. So if we want to succeed in technology, we have to do that. I will make one more point, which is to supplement what you are saying and to react to it. Net zero means that there is no escape from creating sinks and carbon capture and utilization. But the arithmetic of our carbon emissions is such that this is to be a solution only at the margin. It cannot be a solution as a mainstream solution. So I do not see India or any other country moving anywhere near net zero if it continues to burn fossil fuels for electricity generation. It just won't happen. The arithmetic doesn't permit it. We can debate it separately. But I must make that point unambiguously. I said we'll discuss. So the point I make in the book is that we have coal, it is cheap, but if I can get electricity which is even cheaper by 50% by say a unit, I should do that. That's the rational thing to do. And that is what the latest numbers in the market tell us. So it is not a question of becoming green, it's a question of doing what is cheap. That is the sea change that has happened in the market in the last 3 years. So it's not a question of getting fossil fuel free electricity. It is getting the cheapest possible electricity. That is possible electricity is solar plus storage, not new thermal. I mean, there's a chapter on nuclear here. We can discuss that separately. That's why I'm pushing the point on storage, and we can be the world leaders in storage. We are already global leaders in development of storage and policy on storage. No other country is as far ahead in storage as we are. One other point I would make, and that is in terms of the SMEs. Now, the SMEs can be easily made green with very modest policy inputs. They have a bigger challenge in technology and modernization and scale and so on. But their becoming green is relatively easy in India because India's energy transition towards green electricity is moving much faster than possible. And it is possible to segment supply of carbon-free electricity on a real-time basis to industry, to SMEs, so that they can all claim to be zero carbon or near zero carbon, meet CBM requirements, and leapfrog into becoming major exporters to the EU market. And we do not realize that the EU market is as large as the American market. And we are about to have a free trade agreement with them. So we can leapfrog with smart industrial policies. And that's why the rising ambition is that most of us are not inclined to believe that we can leapfrog, we can become major exporters of manufactured goods, etc., etc. But Apple has shown that we can do it. So if Apple can do it, everybody else can do it, Indian firms as well as foreign firms. But government alone can provide carbon-free electricity to manufacturing so that you are CBM compliant. So that's the kind of historic opportunities and inflection points that are there. But it's for government policy to drive it, and which is why the book is aimed at persuading decision makers. And I must confess, I have now nothing to do with government and determining government policy except to write and speak. I think I've covered most major points. If I've left out anything, you can please ask me again.
Thank you, sir. And maybe, Dr. Parikh, you could come at the end. So you want to come in here, or you want to come at the end? Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Mehra, thank you.
Thank you. I'm continuing to hear everything deliberately that I'm hearing to see how much of it sounds like within the box and how much of it is like your questions were very good. Asking what is out of the box thinking. And so that's my framing. But I'm going to begin with the SDGs again. There's not just one SDG, huh? There's 17 SDGs. And the world realized that it's not okay to achieve one at the cost of not achieving the others or harming the others. All 17, because all of them are affecting some important aspect of people's lives. It's public health availability, primary education availability, equal opportunities for income generation, inequality. And yes, there's one SDG which is concentrating on energy, and we have on water, environment, the whole gamut. Now, these 17 are most of them everywhere. There's no place in the world, most developed, pristine community in Colorado Boulder in Colorado, we can't claim that, we are so pristine and pure. We don't have any of the SDGs problems. They have 7, 8 of them, and they know it, and they're trying to work on them. So now, if you have in every place 17 problems, they all are going to be connected with each other in that place. So solving the electricity problem in the place while making the water problem worse is not really helping the sustainability of the lives of the people, or concentrating so much on primary education without the health of the people being taken care of. The present global way, the scientific way since the European Enlightenment of solving complex problems is to break them into parts, and then you get experts, and they all gather together and put their resources behind each part. So you say that here are 17, then you can have a competition. Is the energy community reaching the SDG goals faster than the health community reaching its goals faster? And then, of course, in the competition amongst them, they're destroying the lives of everybody down there. So in this scientific way of looking at it now, I'm saying a systems way of looking at it, I've done some calculations and others have confirmed that if you were to take out of these 17 very complex problems, like energy one is not one thing, it's many things together. And similarly, all of them say that only 7 of these very complex things are relevant and important to a community. In Kerala, some 7, in Himachal, another 7, and as I said, in Los Angeles, another 7 or 8. How many different configurations will the system take? It's 94 million. So you cannot have a universal solution for any of these things, a universal policy for any of these things, which would be good for everybody. The solutions have to be local system solutions supported by the community there, because it's their lives that are being impacted, and they are the people who resist the big plants, the nuclear plants. It may be good for everybody, but at that moment, it's very bad for us. In the future, maybe my grandchildren might benefit from it if they have a chance to become alive. So the change in philosophy, the change in ideology, the change in the way we conceive problem solving has to be for very complex problems like the ones we are addressing. Local systems, solutions, cooperatively found and implemented by communities. And in this, India is proving to be, and has always been perhaps, the leader in the world. Except that, at the time of our independence and thereafter in the plan, this was Gandhiji's, let me call it Gandhiji's, but it was our way. We adopted the industrialization model, which was not Soviet model. It was the very Western model. It was the way you're supposed to modernize and increase your economy's output and progress. And we adopted that. And that we set aside our ways to say, oh, village ki baat hai, when are we going to get rid of our villages and move people into the cities, out of agriculture into manufacturing. And that is what's caused the problem for the whole world and for us. So local community solutions, system solutions, which in the community can't be solving just one problem, they know it. They have to solve many together. So we have to be humble when we are helping the people in the community to improve their lives, and they have to do it, to come as experts and say, look, I've got a solution for you. And it's worse when you put money behind it. The central government scheme, they have no option. You have to do it this way. And that is why most of our government schemes do not. They achieve something. But I mean, Rajiv Gandhi put it about 15% is the ultimate benefit. I don't know what he meant, but we've done studies, and McKinsey has done them very well, to show the globally, using artificial intelligence, 40,000 micro-regions of the world, to see the overall progress of these micro-regions in terms of broad indicators of sustainability, environment, inclusion, that's incomes. And if you say the GDP, how much is contributed, 40,000 micro-regions around the world, rich countries, poor countries, only 20% of the total gain of improvement of well-being is attributable to the GDP of their country. The remaining 80% is local. So this pursuit of, once we get the GDP right, good things will happen to everybody. The process of getting the GDP is destroying, strongly saying, everybody. Now, conceptually, industrial policy, innovation policy. I had the privilege of sitting with the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council, as well as the new Innovation Council we created with Sam Petroda. And since again I was in the planning commission member, I would sit on the right side of him also in the meetings. And we realized that from our own experience in India, but before that experience of Japan, which as you said, industrialized very fast without raw materials and resources, but it had human beings. He said the only thing we have is our human beings. And if they learn, and if our enterprises learn how to engage human beings, and the enterprise then learns together, and the government policies, to the extent that they applied them, encourage unions, encourage the rights of people to speak up. And of course, both sides settled it without any big strikes. But it was recognized that the voice of the people, they would be saying something in the interest of their organization and their own lives. So Japan became very rapidly the machine that changed the world. I had the privilege of working with Japanese companies and trying to absorb their learning systems for us in India, and then with Korean companies, and lately following Chinese companies. The key thing is this: they know that the only asset that you have in your enterprise or your country that can learn and improve its own value itself is a human being. Only one. So India is rich in human beings. It has, yes, very little hydrocarbons, it has very little land per capita. We are the richest in terms of human beings. So if we are not going to use human beings for a competitive advantage, we are doomed. So our whole philosophy is talked of employment. Our enterprises, smart enterprises, must realize if they're going to remain competitive in a very competitive world vis-a-vis Chinese, Vietnamese, and others catching up, unless we take advantage of this petroleum energy equivalent here. I mean, Saudi Arabia can grow very well because it's got so much petroleum energy. It's devised its entire industrial policy based on the use of more hydrocarbon energy and amassed a lot. Okay, so if we had that, that's fine. But we were human beings. So our assets, which we have more than anybody else has, is the source of our competitive advantage, provided we use it. This GCCs, to me, is just showing how thinking is wrong. We are saying, oh, it's a good thing. They're not allowing our people to go there and work. I think it's a good thing because we then have the talent here. But where will this talent be employed? In GCCs, the fastest growing sector in the IT industry. Who owns the intellectual property of the GCCs? Apple does, if they do any. But GE does, whoever else does, Philips. So we are once again slaves. Yeah. Previously, you owned our land and you went off. Then you said, well, you can't own the land, you take our labor to your places. So you're, commanding our labor for yourself. And now you're reversing that, but you've always, and more recently, controlled our minds. We've allowed ourselves to be colonized. बड़े अच्छे हैं, हमारे से superior हैं. R&D and innovation. But what is innovation? And this is coming to the history of Japan. At the time that it was industrializing, its expenditure on R&D was very small. At the time that China has been industrializing, its expenditure on R&D is very small. And therefore we say they're stealing. I mean, they couldn't have got this if they hadn't spent on R&D. They must have taken ours. But like the Japanese said, and what we learned in the Tatars and myself, is that people learn, the system learns. Innovation is not what's produced in the laboratory. Innovation is how you do things differently. To scale, last point, and this is to industry. We have this thing that scale must have a large manufacturing unit because the unit cost will be low. The capital cost is allocated over a larger number. But it will be low cost if it's used immediately and all the time. So it's very vulnerable to market change. And it takes a long time to get it to that scale. We had in the power sector the ultra mega power projects. Good, same idea. We're going to have huge projects for which government will clear the land and prepare this investment-ready place and so on, get the people's permissions, or the government will be in charge, so that's okay. And near coal. And so we asked private sector to bid, Indian private sector companies to bid, you get these projects. Okay, there were 5 ultra mega power projects. 4 of them were won by Reliance Power, which is now defunct. The 5th by Tatas. Meanwhile, Dr. Manmohan Singh had requested in his previous term some Indian industrialists, that is Larsen and Toubro, Bharat Forge, who built BAHEL, which is in the power equipment sector itself, that would you please invest yourself, take your risk, and build your enterprise to produce power equipment better than the Chinese standard and equal to the world standard, so that we don't have to import from them. When these projects were licensed and given, naturally the private entrepreneurs were given the freedom to buy their equipment from wherever, and the Chinese equipment was very cheap. So they all said, we will buy the Chinese equipment, all of them, including Tata's. But these companies got together with me and said they're dumping, so produce the case and all the rest. And we said, well, we couldn't prove exactly that they were dumping because their costs are really low, but there was some of it. And so then our Ministry of Commerce people said, the case is a very difficult one. And so our people then said, look at other factors. And the Reliance people, I met them, Mr. Ambani himself, Anil. And I said, what's wrong with you? You're supposed to be nationalists in this matter. He said, I'm running a business, don't you see? You are from BCG, you should know, and you guide me how to make this business go. I said, what is it? If you are going to be buying this equipment from us, what do you lose? He said, the financing of it. The Chinese gives, like others, Japanese would give, such low-cost finance. The government has got out of industrial financing, industrial development banks. It's part of that philosophy. We closed down, made them into commercial. So just see the ideology. So anyway, we said, fine. The present costs are whatever they are. I called the Tata people. I said, look, you're supposed to be India-spirited. Why are you also succumbing to buy these others and not buying? The BHEL equipment and others was proven in the tests and applications here as good. And Mr. Ambani, I'm sorry, L&T, he was really up in arms. He's a nationalist, L&T made everything. And he came, big man, to me, he says, this prime minister of yours, one side has fooled us, and I've gone and put all of this. I want you to go and take me to him and say, sir, don't fool us. If all your advisors and your ministries do just the opposite. So I just come take you to the prime minister. I asked the Tata people, what is the additional cost that is going to come to you by the extra finance cost, which is to the equipment cost, and came to something, 2 or 3% on the operating cost. The main operating cost is the fuel, which is going to be the same for everybody. Operating cost. How long, if you're a fast learning organization, will it take you to reduce 2-3% of your operating cost by improving efficiency? If you don't know how to do it, I'll come and do it for you within 1 year, like the Japanese and others did. No, we understand what you're saying, but we Tatas are going to buy Japanese, and they did. But the other 4, Reliance, you're going to have to tackle. But what happened in that, our poor fellows who invested in that equipment, to produce it, they lost that first tranche of orders. And other than BHEL, because it is their business, the others gave up on producing power equipment in India. So I wish to say that when you talk of scale, please think of scope. And linking it to the other systems thing, systems, the scope of a system makes it resilient and makes everything in it efficient. And the scope of the system means many things on a small scale must happen together. That is, when you talk of clusters, many things in a small scale happening together. The Chinese story is not big plants first. They did adopt a Soviet or Western idea of big things. Then simultaneously, in the agriculture sector and the small industry sector, the whole thing was small private enterprises, but the prices of them were controlled not directly, but by controlling the trade, which was government and still remains finance sector government owned. So rethink the path.
Oh, nothing much to add, I think, at the end of the program, but I would just like to congratulate, I think, Mr. Shankar once again. And just one acknowledgement to what Mr. Venkatesan mentioned, I think the importance of energy efficiency, I think we did not touch that, but I think that's extremely important. We always believe that energy efficiency should be the first choice of fuel. And of course, many of the industries and opportunities do exist everywhere, I think. Thanks a lot.
Now it's turn for Professor Jyoti Parikh to make closing remarks on behalf of both the organizations for putting it together. Thank you.
So thank you very much for organizing this. But just let me 1 or 2 points I am thinking that the issue of private sector and SDG and the renewable, they are all linked together because it offers possibility from 500 megawatts to 1 kilowatt type of range. And that was not the way it was going earlier. It was going from 100 megawatt to 220 to 500 to 1,000. And then it came down to a proliferation of sizes. And that sizes required a private sector of various types, small, mediums, micro, etc., and home-based, and so on. So it all matched the ecosystem of the industrial thing was really very favorable. And the other thing you mentioned about the getting more out of energy. You know, I've been watching the MJ per capita of the world, and it's remaining around 50 MJ per capita for many decades, actually, around that number. Because developed countries are coming down. I don't think they are sacrificing anything for not having energy, but they are using it differently. And of course, their GDP is growing. So that, but GDP is growing, but the per capita MJ per capita is not growing. So they have managed to do that. So we are increasing more, putting more energy into the system at less and less cost. But let me now, there are many things to be said, but I'm glad that we have found a path to an affordable energy, which is can reach all kinds of segments, whether it is users or producers. It's not just the book, but this seminar itself was a good food for thought. So I'm glad we organized this. Big congratulations to you for having brought out this book, and I'm sure it will do very well, and more would be even coming up, I'm sure. Let me thank everybody for coming here, all of you for coming here, as well as Nagesh for taking 1 second to respond to say, yes, let's do this. So it is very, I'm glad this has worked out, and I wish all the best for this book.
Thank you very much, everyone. And it was a fascinating discussion. And as everyone expressed that not only that this book is very, very insightful, but also very highly readable. And then we are looking forward to very soon another book by him. So we'll have another occasion to discuss that sometime soon. On that note, thank you very much once more.